Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Salesforce Ben interview where we interview thought leaders from around the Salesforce ecosystem. And I'm very excited to be here today with Kevin Boyle from Gearset. And some of you know Gearset as one of the pioneers in Salesforce DevOps in the Salesforce ecosystem. How's it going, Kevin?
I'm doing very well, Ben. Thanks very much, man. Just got back from a week's holiday in France, so I'm feeling very relaxed. I've even, for an Irish person, managed to get some suntan or something closely approximated. A close approximation of it, so I'm feeling pretty good. How are you?
Very impressive. Yeah, doing good. Trying to cope with the heat in the UK with no air conditioning. It's funny you mentioned that because one of the things we like to kick off these conversations with is kind of informal question to humanize the big scary CEO. No, I'm joking, but yeah, I was kind of interested. What is your perfect idea of a holiday for you?
Oh, it depends. So I've kind of got the two sides of me, and I like to feed them both equally. So next week I'm going to Lanzarote to like a nice hotel, and I'll lie by a pool with my Kindle, and I'll just sit and read books for 4 or 5 days as like nice waiters bring me cocktails. So I definitely like that type of holiday, and I'm doing that this summer, and that'll be good fun. But then I also like to go cycling and skiing and hiking and stuff. So I've kind of got the both. If I only did the like lazy luxury holiday thing, I'd feel a bit unfulfilled. And if I only did the like active in the mountains and stuff, I think I feel like I'm missing out on something. So I like the both sides of it. And then my wife Kira is much more a fan, I think, of the nice pool and cocktails and nice wine by the hotel. So that's nice. She's like helps make sure that at least happens once every couple of years.
Yeah, I think I'm quite similar to you. My partner does like the exploring holidays, like Asia, which I do love. But then you feel like you need a holiday after your holiday, so it's it's good to kind of balance them out.
You've told me before you do the digital detox one as well. Like they just go away, put your phone and 4G off in a cupboard in like 3 or 4 days.
Yeah,
nothing.
Attempt to do that.
I think that one I'd struggle with. Even when I go to like a nice place, I'll still like check in like what's happening in the world, what's happening. I think like being away from my phone entirely would be just too far of a stretch for me.
Yeah, I'm similar. It's not a good habit, but yeah, it's life now. Anyway, yeah, thanks a lot for that, Kevin. So it would be great if you could introduce yourself and a bit more about your professional career.
Sure. So I'm Kevin. I'm the CEO of Gearset, which, as you said, is a Salesforce DevOps vendor. I'm a software engineer by background. I'm a software engineer at heart, although I haven't had the opportunity to write very much code in the last sort of 3 or 4 years. But prior to that, grew up in a big family and had older brothers that were very into computers and kind of got me into them at a young age. So I've grown up around computers always. Starting with like the Amstrad CPC. If anyone watching is old enough to know what that is, then congratulations. But that was like how I got started in computers. And what was great about computers of that era was you just like they couldn't do anything without doing some programming on them. You know, like even to like play games or whatever it is you wanted to do, you had to do something. You had to understand how to use a programming language. And so I got exposed to programming at a very, very young age, and then really liked that. Really liked that you could make computers do stuff. Like that was sort of like a nice little endorphin hit if you like type the stuff in and then got it to do things. So I'm one of those slightly obnoxious, lucky people that from a very young age, I sort of always knew that I would want to do something in this world. And I went to university, did computer science, did a couple of internships at Microsoft, which for me was kind of like the peak. That was why, as I was growing up, as a nerd, like all I ever wanted to do was work for Microsoft. And then I worked for Microsoft and it was amazing. But it was a very big company. So I decided that I wanted to try smaller companies, and post-graduation, I moved to Cambridge here in the UK and worked for a company here that did enterprise search appliances. And it was fun. I learned a bunch of stuff. And then I went and worked at a company called Redgate that did DevOps for databases, primarily for SQL Server for the Microsoft platform. And yeah, I loved that. Like found the culture of the company was great and stayed there for 7 years before leaving to start Gearset. And I think it was only leaving to start Gearset that would have had me leave there. It was a fantastic company and had all of the things that I get a kick out of in terms of, I was always into software engineering, not for the sake of software engineering, but for building products and building things that people could use. And so I get a kick out of seeing people use the software that I build, and Redgate had that type of culture. So I really enjoyed that. But yeah, software engineer through and through. And then, yeah, if I wasn't doing what I'm currently doing as CEO and all the sort of demands of that role, I would still be writing code. But the total nerd that I am, if I'm very stressed on a weekend or something, like if I'm stressed, I've had a bad week or a busy week or a challenging week, and I need to relax the weekend, I'll either go for a walk or read my Kindle, or sometimes I'll just sit at the computer and write some code for a few hours just to like get that little bit of a hit.
Nice, very interesting. It's interesting to hear you say about kind of growing up and working on computers, because it's something that I've reflected on recently as well. My dad was very into computers, and it's something that I was being exposed to from a very young age, but it's something I've always like kind of taken for granted, but actually it was quite a good thing because it's kind of led up to, you know, influence my career up until this point. But cool, thanks a lot for that, Kevin. So I suppose to kick off, you know, we're going to be talking about DevOps and the introduction to DevOps and the history of DevOps and the Salesforce ecosystem, as well as Gearset. And I don't know if you follow Reddit at all, but there's a subreddit called Explain Like I'm Five, and I think it'd be a really good precedent if you could just explain in simple terms what Salesforce or what DevOps is.
Sure. So DevOps is a series of tools and cultural mannerisms and processes that allows software teams or teams of folks to come together and build a solution to solve some problem, deliver that solution to the end users. So that's probably at its most basic. Hopefully the folks viewing this aren't five, although with the way Trailhead's going and the ability of Salesforce to get folks energized in the ecosystem early, maybe there is a bunch of 5-year-olds watching it. But yeah, the slightly diving deeper answer is, how do you get a whole team of folks, admins, developers, business stakeholders, how do you get everybody working together to understand what solution could solve the business problem or problem of the day, and then build that in a way that's predictable, robust, reliable? How do you make sure that it actually solves the problem that you set out to solve, and do all that in just a way that's a nice, relaxed, predictable workflow? That's what DevOps should allow you to achieve.
So diving into you know, kind of the meat of it. So, you know, I believe DevOps has been around since I think it's around 2008. It was kind of coined in 2009. It came into the is that kind of correct?
Yeah,
why the DevOps? Yeah,
I think that was certainly that was the point at which it like exploded into the consciousness of the software industry.
Okay, so fairly recently, but it wasn't until 2015 that Gearset was founded, and you know, Salesforce DevOps and other companies were founded, and Salesforce DevOps took off. So you know, it's kind of like a 6-year lag. So what was the reason that it took so long for DevOps to pop up in the world of Salesforce?
It's a good question. I think it's a little bit of a reflection of the platform. If you sort of go back to what Salesforce, you know, started out as, certainly that's a customizable SaaS and CRM, and from that, you know, grew the platform that we all love. But it didn't start that way, and so it attracted a different audience maybe than folks that were building on top of .NET or Java, and you know, not exclusively, right? Like every generalization's got lots and lots of exceptions, but I think in the general case there was a slightly different audience on Salesforce. The problem we were solving was slightly differently sized, especially in the early days of Salesforce. You know, if you compare the scope and breadth of the platform now to what, you know, it was in 2008, 2009, you know, they're almost unrecognizable. And then also the ability for Salesforce as a platform to support DevOps, to support source control, to support continuous integration at like a technical level, like the APIs and the way Salesforce could allow you to externalize stuff. You know, it just made it hard. And so there were a bunch of people doing DevOps for Salesforce back then. You know, they were making that work in different ways, but it was really hard. Like it was really, really hard. And you still, even at your best, could only get to like a close approximation of what was happening on other platforms. And so I think what allowed it to explode was a couple of things. Salesforce recognizing that they had built a platform And that platform needed some platform primitives that could support a DevOps workflow. The audience understanding that, hey, the complexity now of what we're managing requires a robust delivery pipeline to do this safely. And businesses recognizing that, yeah, our investment here, the level of complexity that we've got represented through our investment in Salesforce, that this requires, you know, a grown up approach to software development. So I think all those things came together, and I think that's still happening. I think Salesforce DevOps is still at its most, you know, nascent phase. Like I'm very proud of what we've done with Gearset, but I think there's so much more, like in terms of capability that'll be brought to market, the number of people doing it, how deeply embedded within the ecosystem it is. I think all that is still to happen. I think Salesforce is still a few years behind some other platforms and the way other teams work. Again, not all Salesforce teams. There's a whole bunch of Salesforce teams who are, you know, some of the best in the world at DevOps, but I think there's in the sort of general team, the average team, there's still a way to go.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I think you're completely right. You know, even though Gearset was founded in 2015, I think for me personally, I only really started looking into DevOps in last year. I think early last year, because it was kind of, it got to a point where it was kind of, you know, you couldn't really ignore it. It was, you know, it was becoming ubiquitous. So yeah, still very early days, I think. Gearset was founded in 2015, which was, you know, right around the time a lot of other companies were popping up. So you could say that Gearset were on the forefront of, you know, Salesforce DevOps. So how did Gearset come to be? How did you recognize this problem and start building Gearset?
Sure. So as I said, I was working at a company at the time called Redgate Software, who are a DevOps vendor for the SQL Server market for the Microsoft platform. And a lot of Cambridge companies hire a bunch of really smart Cambridge grads, and there's a really love of like the not invented here syndrome stuff. So Redgate, like a whole bunch of other companies, had built its own homegrown CRM and had kind of, you know, thought, hey, we can do this. We've got a bunch of software engineers. We can build something. And like, obviously you can't, right? There's a reason Salesforce exists. It's a massive problem, and they have tens of thousands of software engineers making their CRM better and better and better. So got to a point around 2014, 2015, somewhere around that time frame, when Redgate brought Salesforce in as the CRM. And maybe a little bit unusually, because there was a bunch of software engineers around, we're able to use a partner in London to do the implementation, use Make Positive, but also put a bunch of its own software engineers into the mix and got them building on it. And what was clear from the start was, you know, the power of the platform. You didn't have to spin up servers. You didn't have to think about lots of security and authentication and authorization. There was just so much that Salesforce took care of for you. But there was definitely a challenge then, you know, taking a bunch of folks who are used to source control, used to continuous integration, used to static code analysis, used to robust refactoring, all the sort of stuff that you're used to from other platforms. They really struggled with that and started looking around. It's like, hey, there must be a company like us, you know, a company that builds really, really great DevOps products for the Salesforce ecosystem and the way we do for the Microsoft ecosystem. And looked around, and there were some companies, there's a few that were popping up, but felt that there was something more. There was something else that we felt that we could bring to the whole thing in terms of product execution and product excellence. You know, we'd spent, you know, Matt, the co-founder, and I, and the other folks that started with us, we'd spent 7-8 years at that point building DevOps products, and we kind of got that, and we knew there was loads we didn't know about Salesforce, but we got like, we know what great looks like if you get teams collaborating really effectively and get the tooling so that it blends into the background and just gets out of their way. And we thought when we looked around the market, there was nothing that appealed to us in that way. So we quit Redgate and started Gearset. We sort of thought, we know lots about DevOps. We think we can do something great there. We don't know that much about Salesforce, but we're excited about it. We're passionate about it. And we can bolster that. So how do we bring those two things together? And those two things together is what Gearset became.
Yeah, great story. It's funny how these things kind of just, you know, come out of nowhere and suddenly you're CEO of a DevOps company.
Yeah. Well, in the early days, it was just like 7 product folks. Like it was 7 of us that quit Redgate to do Gearset. And I think it was 6 software engineers and 1 UX engineer where the title doesn't really fit, because he's essentially the world's like best product manager / UX / CSS ninja. He's just this like amazing dude. But it was the 7 of us together. All we did was obsess about product. We just spoke to customers all day long, and then we built product all evening long, and then we just iterated that every single day. So yeah, I had the job title CEO, but I didn't really know what I was letting myself in for. In those early days, it was just, that first year was just an exciting, frenetic. There was sort of no expectation on us, so we could just we just spoke to customers. We were like humble and honest about our ignorance. We just learned, and took what we knew about DevOps and thought, well, hey, we know what it looks like over there. And sure, if we speak to you, we know your challenge. Cool, like, can we put this together and just iterate? And then the next day we'd go back to them and say, hey, we built this. What do you think? Is that? And we just do that just again. So that first year was just so much fun.
Yeah, no, it really sounds really exciting. And I think it's funny because around that time, I was just Googling the exact date, but I think it was the 2015 Stack Overflow developer survey where Salesforce was voted the most dreaded platform to work with. And you obviously founded the company at the exact right time.
Yeah. And then Salesforce started to invest. Again, it was like a nice sort of coming of everything together. I mentioned Salesforce, starting to expose those platform primitives like metadata API and making that a little bit easier to work with, and the tooling API. There's a whole bunch of things they have done that have enabled companies like Gearset to do what we do. And the sort of word in the grapevine was that Stack Overflow survey result was one of the things that certainly triggered investment from Salesforce leadership. But I still think that survey kind of misses the point, because if you compare like someone that likes coding in Haskell or C++, they're probably not going to get excited by Salesforce, and the things that Salesforce allows you to do. Like they're sort of, they get different satisfaction in life. They don't try to compare them as apples to apples, right? Like they're different things. And Salesforce, even then, I think was an incredibly exciting platform, and an incredibly exciting platform to develop on top of, if you met it for what it was and what it did and what it allowed you to do, and didn't try to compare it to, I can spin up a load of containers, and inside those containers, I can have a bunch of C++ running or a bunch of Rust running. That is a different thing, right? And I think that survey kind of missed the point a little bit, but I'm glad that it had the reaction that it did within Salesforce, because it's enabled Gearset to be Gearset.
I would imagine, feel free to disagree, but you would say it's probably, you would probably see that all Salesforce professionals should learn about DevOps, Salesforce DevOps in some form. So, if you would agree with that, or even if you didn't, how would you suggest that people get started learning about Salesforce DevOps if they currently know not a lot?
Sure, I'd actually take a step back personally. Now, this might be a weird thing to say as a CEO of a DevOps vendor who lives and breathes by folks adopting DevOps. But I think the most DevOps is, as I said, a set of process tools and cultural mannerisms for how you collaborate as a team and build a software solution and get it out to end users. So if you take it in that way, then it's more important to take a step back and don't learn about this DevOps thing. Not yet, very soon, but not yet, because that'll send you down a path and it'll start to bias you and it'll start to influence you. And that's good at a point. But to begin with, I'd just sit down with my team. I'd sit down and think about how we collaborate together. How do we build software on top of the platform? And what works, what doesn't work? Where could we optimize? How often, from a request to the business comes in, a request from the business comes in, how long does it take us to build something? How happy are our business stakeholders? Do they think that the rate of change is, what they want, or do they need it to be improved, or all those sorts of things? So I'd sit down and I'd start to do like that sort of diagnostic approach. So if you've read Richard Rummel's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, it's a really good book, and there's a thing in it around like doing a diagnosis of where you're at before you try and change anything, and it sort of really resonates with me. So I'd take a step back. I'd think through what's unique to my situation. What would my desired future state be for me? Don't let any vendor or educational content or influencer or MVP or whatever tell me what I should be doing. Like, what is most important to me right now? Then I would go off and I'd learn about DevOps, and I'd start to do things like Gearset has DevOpslaunchpad.com, where you can learn about DevOps concepts in a really like vendor neutral way. We just put it together for educational content. I know Salesforce Ben has a bunch of great DevOps content. Trailhead's got a couple of courses. There's not that many, but you go get those badges, and put all those things together and start to learn about what the art of the possible is. And then I'd start to write down. I'd go back to my original diagnosis and I'd say, well, hey, we've got a 2-week release cadence, and the business really wants us to have a, almost a continuous delivery release cadence. So, okay, well, how do we get from where we are to where that is? And what would we have to tackle along the way? Well, today it takes us 3 days to get our changes from our developer environment into our production environment. Or today we make the occasional sneaky change in production. And actually, when we think about the last 6 months, our last 3 outages were caused by changes directly in production. So how do I fix those things? How is DevOps going to help me fix that? And then go speak to some folks. Start with Gearset, because obviously, but go speak to folks and see if they can then provide any tooling or help to support it. But start with your situation first. Don't let folks tell you what it is you should be doing or what best practice is. I find those things are often they're a little bit, for me anyway, not the best place to start. I always like to start with a very concrete thing rather than some best practice nirvana.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. I really like the point about kind of taking a step back, because I think, especially as you know, in Salesforce, there's so many people who don't have a traditional tech background. So, treating it like a more of a project, I suppose, gathering requirements, understanding pain points, taking stock of where you are, and then going out, and looking at solutions, whether, it's Gearset or other options. So yeah, no, very interesting. Would you suggest kind of, that there's a lot of, a huge amount of Salesforce admins and developers who are the measure would both be involved in, using DevOps tools. So is there kind of different learning paths for each type of role? I mean, obviously there's a lot more roles, but, let's choose those as 2 kind of core roles. Yeah. Would you kind of suggest different approaches?
I think they might have different lenses or angles of attack on the problem, but I think it needs to be integrated. We sometimes interact with teams where the admins work in one way and the developers work in another, and it almost always, not always, but almost always is like a bit of a code smell. It's sort of a cultural wrinkle, and it doesn't lead to the best outcomes. The most high-performing teams view this as a single problem. So they view it as a problem that's going to involve their admins, their developers, their business stakeholders. How do we get everybody together? Everybody that's responsible for defining, implementing, and delivering the solution. How do we get all those folks together and think of a process that's joined up? And different people will jump into it at different points in different ways, but it's a single thing, right? And so I think that's the way to tackle it. So I think if I was sitting down, as I do often with customers, to start to think about their DevOps process, I always make sure that all the voices are in the room. I don't want just the release manager or just the platform owner or whoever, right? I need all the voices, because I need to understand what their pain points are and what they're trying to get out of it. And then you can come up with a coherent process that involves everybody. And then in terms of tooling and how they'll attack it, yeah, different people are going to work differently. Devs are going to want to maybe be in VS Code or code spaces and committing through like Git, just like on the terminal, on the command line. Some admins want to work that way, but more admins we find like the sort of UI-driven workflow that Gearset provides for them. So yeah, I think people will come at it in different ways, but they'll all understand the overall end-to-end pipeline. I think that's when it's most powerful. That's the most effective teams working that way anyway.
So we've kind of covered the current state of play, and I'd be really interested to see how you see Salesforce DevOps evolving in the future. Salesforce has brought out some tools. We've kind of touched on Salesforce DX, and Salesforce DevOps is kind of coming out of the woodwork after a few delays. So how do you see DevOps evolving, and do you see how do you see DevOps Center fitting into that?
Yeah, I think the biggest change I think that'll happen to Salesforce DevOps isn't actually on the tooling side. So I think the tools have made massive leaps and bounds over the last few years. And I think there's massively more they can do. There's a whole bunch of simplification and, going back to what I said a moment ago about trying to create a coherent path that involves everyone. I think there's still a little bit too disjoint in a whole bunch of ways. So I think there's more progression for tooling. But I think the probably bigger thing will be on some of the cultural stuff. So if you go back to that sort of original DevOps manifesto and philosophy, it was about empowering teams to deliver software and do that in a robust and predictable way. And still, too many teams we interact with today, they will have some sort of external gate. There'll be an external stakeholder that has to sign off. And so that starts to really create friction in your delivery pipeline, where you're going to create delays waiting for this other person to sign off. And so your cadence as a team suffers. And you can see this in like the DORA metrics and stuff. If you go back to, I think it was the 2019 DORA report that had a whole bunch of stuff around how the best teams are the teams that are empowered to make those decisions themselves and be less reliant on external stakeholders. And obviously, as a software engineer, what I'm not saying is a whole bunch of software engineers just making decisions of like, hey, this will work for our stakeholders, blah, blah, blah. But like making sure those teams are fully enabled, either through additional voices in the team or else just they're fully aware of the business context in which they're operating. But when those teams can make those decisions, then all of that stuff just moves much, much faster. So I think that's probably going to be the bigger shift. And probably the third thing, so tooling will improve. That's kind of inevitable. It'll involve more people and become more simple. I think the bigger one is the cultural stuff. And then probably just the scale of it. So I think it's really hard to get market data, but I think there's about sort of between 8 and 12% of Salesforce teams, do DevOps in some fashion. And I think that sort of tells a story for how early we are in this journey. So the number of teams that are going to adopt it, the number of different people that are going to come in with their viewpoint, I think there's just massive, massive growth. And then through all of that, I suspect Salesforce will continue to keep us on our toes, where, you're sort of in your question is this definition of Salesforce DevOps. Well, the definition of Salesforce changes on like a quarterly basis as they do acquisitions and they bring out new products, and that's going to keep happening, right? So the scope of what Salesforce is and what Salesforce teams manage and do for their businesses, that's going to change. And then that change is going to bring about new DevOps challenges, ways to collaborate, ways to deliver software. So I think all of that's going to come together to just have constant change over the next few years.
And I was going to ask a follow-up question around, something that we speak about a lot on the blog is kind of career and finding a niche. And, if you want to, stand out from the market and earn more money, niching down into a product industry, is a good thing to do. And, DevOps is a very up and coming niche or has up and come. But I was wondering if there was a particular niche inside of DevOps that you think people should focus on if they're interested in a career. Would you suggest, you kind of maybe suggested in your previous answer that the softer side of things and the process side of things actually might be quite lucrative in years to come?
Yeah, I'm probably very underqualified to answer this question because I've had a very bad time managing my own personal career. I almost, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but almost baked into your question is this idea that your career and your compensation kind of go hand in hand, almost. Whereas I personally just go for the things that I find incredibly interesting, and that's tended to work out okay for me in terms of the finance. But in that sort of Maslow hierarchy thing, like the finance isn't the top end of it for me. So I would go for whatever I was excited and interested in. I have never been very directive about, oh, this is an up and coming area, so I'll go and learn about it. Other people should do that. That's probably a very sensible strategy. It's just not one that I have. If I was going to do that, yeah, I think the closer you can get to business teams, being that bridge of a voice between what your business is actually trying to achieve with software and then the folks that actually implement it, and understanding what's possible. I think engineers and admins and developers bring a whole bunch of just stuff they intuitively know around what's possible, what's difficult, what's easy, how we can join two different systems together, how you can remove manual processes. Like they're very aware of what computers are capable of and what different SaaS products can be plugged together to, achieve things. So I think getting closer to that, being that voice between really deeply understanding your business, really deeply understanding your business, understanding how software is empowering your business to do things, but then also still having that ability to go back to software teams and understand what's possible and being that bridge. I think that'd be an interesting role. It's what lots of BAs do. I think that's a super powerful place to be in, particularly if you're very strong in the technical and very strong in the business, and you can wear both hats. I think that's a cool place to be.
Yeah, nice, thank you. Yeah, and you make a very good point about not wanting to go down the path, or you shouldn't go down the path just for more money. If you're listening to this and you're like, this sounds really boring, probably not too good to venture into DevOps. But no, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Kevin. So I wanted to speak a bit about your latest funding round. So $55 million, I believe. So pretty massive. So congratulations. So we've seen a lot from Gearset, lots of different product lines and saturating in the Salesforce DevOps world. So what can we expect from Gearset in the future with this latest funding round?
Yeah, the funding was really good fun. That was a nice thing to do this year. For those of you that don't know, Gearset was bootstrapped up until this point. So we've had 6-7 years of growth funded by our customers. And that wasn't out of, like occasionally had people ask me like, hey, congrats for not taking funding, or like almost chastising me for not taking funding. I had both sides of this when I go to conferences and things. And for us, it was never really it wasn't a principled decision or any of this sort of stuff. It was just, we were doing what we were doing. We had enough cash to fund the things we wanted to do via our customers betting on us and betting on our product. And that, I feel proud about that. And we, found the right partner. We found a partner that we believed in, that believed in us in terms of how we built the business and how we want to continue to build it. And in terms of the use of that funding, we're a product company through and through, right? So we're going to take that, we're going to invest it in R&D. And we're obviously going to do the sales and marketing stuff as well. Like I think Gearset sales and marketing teams are exceptional. But we're a product company, and that R&D is going to get a big injection to go off and do all the things that we want to do. Matt, Gearset's co-founder, and the whole team in our product and engineering divisions, the roadmap they have come up with, I have never been, and if you're listening to this, you might just think this is a nonsense CEO thing to say, but I really mean it. The roadmap that Gearset has, I have never been involved in anything where the roadmap is as strong, as clear, and as exciting. So the idea of bringing all that capability to market just felt like the right time to go raise some money and accelerate that even further. So that's the thing that we'll do, and that's the thing I'm excited about.
Cool, very good. So if you're a Gearset customer, you've got a lot to look forward to, and if you're not, then stay tuned.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
You kind of touched on the people who work for Gearset there, and I think something that I've noticed, I've interacted with yourself a fair bit and lots of other people from Gearset, and it seems like you've got a really cool culture. Everyone seems just a bunch of people who really get on with each other, similar vibe, care about their customers, want to do good work. So what is the culture like inside of Gearset, and what are the kind of people you look for when you're hiring?
Yeah, I think the culture has evolved quite a lot since the earliest days of the company, but I think the original team really stamped a few things, because the original team hires the next people who hire the next people. So then you've got this delicate balance. You don't want groupthink. You don't want to hire just people like you. But there's a bunch of stuff that we cared about. There's a bunch of stuff that was important to us that we thought were important attributes of great colleagues that we wanted to work with. And we're in this very lucky position, and this very lucky juncture of the timeline that we live in, right? That there's almost full employment, right? Like if you're a software engineer or admin or developer, there's just so many options for places you can go work, that we wanted people that were passionate about building a product to solve people's problems. So that was really, really key. And then what do those people tend to look like? Well, they tend to be very sort of curious people. They tend to want to understand, how the world works, like how you pull things apart and put things back together, and why does stuff work that way, and always asking like why and sort of questioning. And we like those types of people. From the earliest days of the company, again, like a very personal thing that's worked well for me and given me a lot of satisfaction in life is doing things that are a little bit uncomfortable, like put myself outside my my comfort zone and having to learn something new, or do things that, and I guess you know this better than most running a startup as well. In the earliest stage, we're a bunch of software engineers. You end up having to do sales, marketing, business development, all the other things like doing payroll, like ordering supplies for the office. There's just like a whole bunch of stuff that comes to you because where else is it going to go? Someone has to do it. And all that sort of stuff was really uncomfortable. Like for a sort of slightly introverted software engineer, that was the whole bunch of stuff that was like, wow, can I do sales? Can I like start actually asking people for money for the software that we've built that we know has some bugs and stuff? So all that stuff was really good fun. And so we try to find people that aren't afraid of doing new things, of taking a little bit of risk, having that little bit of, I almost hate the word, but like a little bit of entrepreneurial spirit. Like they can do, they're not afraid to try things that they don't know how to do. And then do all that in a way where it's a very relaxed culture. It's very, we've now got like managers and stuff. You've got to 170 people, you can't not have that. But we've got a very flat organization, even for the literal layers of hierarchy that you have to have. Folks know they can give their feedback on everything. So when we're doing our Dreamforce prep at the minute, and like a lot of companies would have Dreamforce be the realm of the marketing team or the sales team, but our engineers all have opinion on how Gearset's going to present itself at Dreamforce, and all of our marketers have opinion on the product that our engineers are building. And so we've really worked hard to break down all those silos and how people work together and have knowledge and respect for your colleagues. So all that sort of stuff comes together, makes it a very relaxed atmosphere, and very everyone's very focused on what Gearset's trying to do and how we're trying to help our customers, and that's worked well for us.
Nice, sounds very cool. And I'm guessing you're hiring at the moment if people are interested.
Yeah, we're hired across everything. So sales, marketing, engineering, product, ops, you name it, we're hiring for it. We were pre the investment, so this isn't some crazy like, hey, take some VC money and just like throw a load of bodies at it and see what happens. Gearset's doubled every year in terms of headcount, or certainly aspired to, but it's hard to hire. And especially with the hiring bar that we put in place, I sometimes wish like, shit, should we relax that a little bit? No. The culture's good. We don't want to relax that hiring bar. Yeah. But we're hiring in the UK, all over the UK remotely, but our hub's here in Cambridge, and then Chicago is our hub in the United States as well.
So we're nearing the end of our chat. So we've kind of gone through the meat of it, which has been super interesting. And there's a few questions that we like to ask everyone on these interviews. So the first one is, do you have anything that keeps you motivated and focused daily?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think being the founder of a company, and again, I don't know, I suspect you can relate to this as well. You sort of start the thing with a mission or what you're trying to get done. And for me and Matt and the team, it was, we had this idea for what Salesforce DevOps could be. And I still think Gearset's, the best option out there for it, but we haven't achieved that thing that we wanted. We haven't achieved the thing that we think it can be. And so it feels like real unfinished business. So I come to work every day excited to chase that thing. That's exciting from like that professional point of view. Gearset's one of the most fun things I've ever been involved with. So like coming to work every day and getting to continue to build the company and build the product and work with our customers and I sort of mentioned there's sort of 8 to 12% of Salesforce teams use DevOps, getting that number to 80 or 90%, that would be that's a fun thing to come to work to do. And then on a personal level, like friends and family and cooking and holidays, all the usual stuff that keeps me grounded. But I must admit my work-life balance isn't isn't what I aspire to for the team that I have around me. I hope they have a better work-life balance than I am. So I get a serious kick out of work.
And how about any kind of routines, habits, or tools that you use to stay on track of things, or keep your work or personal life managed?
Real boring, basic stuff. I do like inbox zero. I'm a bit of a fascist about that. I get down to like, I'm regularly in. So I've been on this call for about an hour. So my inbox will probably be up to like 20 or 30 emails, but I'll keep that at zero all day long. I like to, I'm a little like, I'm the classic sort of software engineer archetype of, I like things organized in boxes, both like sort of mentally and literally in my home. Everything's in its place and a place for everything, that kind of attitude. So I'll do like inbox zero, use like Slack pretty effectively, sort of from that productivity tools point of view perspective. And then from like a work-life balance perspective, I'm married to someone that isn't in tech. So she doesn't care. She doesn't care about any of this stuff. And that's very nice for keeping you grounded. So when you go home in the evenings, like you're sort of forced to switch off because the person that you're with doesn't care. And we'll like normally go into the house. I'll do some cooking. We like to cook together. Just signed up to Gusto and like get the meals in and do like the cooking that sort of separates the work day from the sort of personal. So yeah, that's the sort of the routines that I go through.
Nice, very cool. I'm like the opposite of my inbox. I manage all my tasks out of it. I like email myself, and I've got to do a task, so my inbox is never zero. It's just full of tasks I've got to do for myself.
If you use Gmail, snooze. No, I actually work the same way as you. I've got like my to-do list is in two places, depending on their like genesis of it. I use Slack reminders because Gearset sends no email internally; it's only Slack, and so I'll use Slack reminders as like, oh, Matt slacked me something, but it's not important enough for me to do right now. I'll set a reminder on it, and then like in my head, that's almost done; it's gone. And then for emails, because they're all external, either our suppliers or customers, whatever, I'll use Gmail's snooze feature pretty liberally, and then I'll snooze it and put it into the future for a time when I'll be able to get to it. Oh, and then it also helps that I've got an awesome EA. It makes me sound like I'm the sort of inbox zero, like Nirvana guru thing. Like it also helps that Paula, my EA, is absolutely incredible and does most of the work of the CEO of the company. So like, yeah, that's my other like secret weapon is have someone that does all your work for you.
Nice. Shout out to Paula.
Yeah.
Cool. So, and then final question. So for any Salesforce professionals or Salesforce DevOps professionals who are, or Salesforce professionals that started their DevOps career, do you have any final words of wisdom for those people who want to embark on this journey?
Yeah, ignore the jargon, ignore the complexity, ignore vendors trying to sell you a total vision of what your life could be. Instead, start with what your problems are, start with understanding your team, then go looking for a solution to those problems. So don't bring a solution in for problems you don't have, or a complexity that isn't right for your team. Think deeply about your problem before you speak to anyone else, and then learn in like a vendor neutral way, like DevOps Launchpad or Salesforce Ben or Trailhead. Have a good idea for the things you want to tackle and build yourself a little roadmap. That's the most important thing we talk to about our customers, where folks think there's like I don't have DevOps and I do have DevOps stage. And probably a lot of customers come in with this gap in the middle will be closed by buying a software package. And that's not the way it is. That's not what DevOps is about. So understand where you are, understand the most pressing needs, understand what will come after that, build yourself a little roadmap of how you want to mature to build a robust DevOps process.
Cool. Lovely sign off. And that brings us to the end. So thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, looking forward to put this out soon.
Thanks, Ben. Very nice chatting to you, and bye-bye.
Cheers. See you later.